What if I told you? The royal family's most silent and steadfast member just launched the boldest move against Meghan Markle yet, and no one saw it coming. In the early hours of a rainy Tuesday morning, a car with blacked-out windows slipped quietly through the gates of Sandringham. It carried documents so sensitive they were delivered directly, without staff, without aides, without a word, to the only royal senior enough, sharp enough, and ice-cold enough to handle them without flinching. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Princess Anne. The Princess Royal has rarely spoken publicly about the Sussex drama. While the world dissected Oprah interviews, Netflix docuseries, and leaked paparazzi shots, and stood silent, observing, judging, waiting. But now she's not just speaking, she's acting. And behind the palace gates, that action has a name. Legal probe. Not gossip, not rumors. A full-fledged, initiated investigation into Archewell, the nonprofit that Harry and Meghan built as their post-Megxit redemption arc. The same Archewell that promised transparency, impact, and legacy. The same Archewell now under fire for shady finances, staff exits, and whispered lawsuits. And this time, it's not Piers Morgan launching missiles. It's Anne. The princess known for riding horses in blizzards, telling off presidents without blinking, and doing hundreds of engagements a year with zero drama, has finally stepped into the ring. But why? Why now? What pushed the famously private and to call for royal lawyers, financial auditors, and internal palace intelligence? What was in the sealed envelope she received 2 weeks ago that made her cancel 3 appearances and lock herself in her library for hours? And why is Meghan Markle suddenly vanishing from public view, while multiple legal sources confirm a lawsuit has been quietly filed, naming Archewell, its board, and 2 Sussex insiders? That's not even the worst of it, because what broke last night is the kind of news that could bring down the last standing pieces of the fairy tale. Divorce. Confirmed. Not gossip, not anonymous sources, but a leaked court document, verified by legal insiders, indicating that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are, in fact, legally separating. And this time, it's not just a trial break. It's paperwork, financial settlements, child custody clauses, California court seals. What happened behind the scenes? Why was the royal family blindsided again? And what is Meghan so desperate to hide that she's allegedly trying to block evidence from the Archewell audit being made public? Let's pull back the velvet curtain and walk straight into the storm. Because behind every royal scandal is a pattern: loyalty, betrayal, secrets. And when Princess Anne gets involved, you can be sure it's not just scandal anymore. It's war. The calm before the legal storm. Let's rewind just a few weeks. The media cycle had grown strangely quiet on the Sussex front. No new Netflix features. No bombshell interviews. Meghan had been seen at a charity gala in a sleek gold gown, but not with Harry. He, on the other hand, had been spotted flying commercial. Alone. Phone in hand. Head down. Archewell's website was quietly updated. Key team members had left. Due to restructuring, the press release said. But behind the polished PR statements, something else was brewing. Donors were no longer returning calls. Reports of late filings, missing tax documentation, and an internal rift within the organization were beginning to surface on Reddit, then Twitter, and finally in a niche British outlet known for tracking nonprofit audits. Then came the tipping point. An anonymous email, sent not to a tabloid, not to a journalist, but to Princess Anne's private secretary. Encrypted, untraceable, and signed only with a single name. Lyra. The subject line? You need to look at this before it's too late. Why Princess Anne? Why now? Here's the thing the world forgets. Princess Anne is not just the hardest working royal. She's the gatekeeper. While Charles worries about legacy and image, while William balances duty and diplomacy, and protects something else entirely: the integrity of the institution. She's lived through the Diana years, the Fergie scandals, the Jeffrey Epstein-era tensions, and now the Sussex saga. But she never flinched. Until now. Sources close to palace staff suggest that Anne had been receiving quiet complaints about Archewell for over a year. Nothing formal. Just whispers. A missing document here. An unpaid vendor there. But when Lyra's message hit her inbox, it included something no one could ignore. A list of alleged financial discrepancies. A private message from a former Archewell employee claiming a cover-up. And, perhaps most chillingly, a file name. The Montecito recordings. What are the Montecito recordings? No one knows yet. That's the terrifying part. They're rumored to be internal audio files, recordings of meetings, calls, or even therapy sessions allegedly made by someone inside Archewell, possibly Harry himself. That theory isn't as wild as it sounds. Harry has previously admitted to recording journal-style voice memos for his mental health and memory. If those files exist, and they somehow tie into financial decision-making at Archewell, they could blow everything wide open. But here's what makes this different from every past royal scandal. This time, it's not the media asking questions. It's the monarchy. And when Princess Anne pushed forward the request for an official investigation, she did it without consulting Charles, Camilla, or even William. Why? Because she knew once it was public, it couldn't be undone. And she knew something else, something darker. The leak would come from inside. Meghan's silence, strategy, or panic. It's no accident Meghan Markle hasn't commented. She's a media strategist by nature. Every word she releases is curated, timed, and loaded. So when someone like Meghan goes silent during a full-blown crisis, one involving her brand, her foundation, and now, her marriage, it's either because she's preparing something huge or something has happened that even she didn't see coming. Here's the contradiction. In public, Meghan's image has been polished and triumphant. Award shows, empowerment panels, glowing Vogue interviews. But in private, lawsuits are piling up. Archewell is hemorrhaging goodwill. Staff turnover has become routine. The Spotify deal was dropped. The Netflix contract is hanging by a thread. And Harry? Sources say he's been spending more time in the UK than in Montecito. With security. Alone. Why this story matters now? You might ask, why does this all matter? Why care about another royal fallout? Because this isn't just about Meghan and Harry. It's about power. About what happens when a carefully built image starts to crumble, under the weight of lies, legal pressure, and emotional implosion. It's about the monarchy drawing a line in the sand and saying, not again. It's about Princess Anne, the most loyal servant of the crown, finally standing up to say, enough. And it's about children, Archie and Lilibet, caught in a global storm they never asked for. Most of all, it's about the secrets that have been hidden too long. The receipts, the files, the whispered threats and silent betrayals. Because what happens when the person who swore to protect the monarchy becomes the one pulling it apart? And what happens when even your allies start to walk away? A final twist before the storm breaks. One final detail before we dive deeper. On the morning Princess Anne received the sealed folder, she was overheard telling a royal staffer something strange. Words that chilled the air. It's worse than I thought. She knew exactly what she was doing. Who was she talking about? What did Meghan do? And what exactly did Princess Anne find inside the digital file marked confidential? Archewell transactional summary? The answer, as you'll soon discover, could destroy what little remains of the Sussex fairy tale. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the first crack in the Sussex empire didn't come from a reporter, a royal, or a lawsuit, but from an anonymous email sent at 4:13 a.m.? No one could trace the server. The digital fingerprint had been wiped clean. But the message, it was personal, piercing, precise, and it landed right on the encrypted server inside Princess Anne's private wing at Sandringham. The subject line? You need to look at this before it's too late. What followed would ignite a storm within the palace unlike anything since the days of Diana's infamous tapes. Let's rewind. The night before, Sandringham in silence. It was just after midnight. Rain tapped steadily against the antique windows of Sandringham House. Most of the estate was asleep, except for one room. Princess Anne's study. She'd been reviewing briefing papers from a charity project in Ghana. That's who and is. Tireless, disciplined, silent in storms. But even she paused when the alert blinked red on her screen, reserved only for top-level, direct contacts. She opened it, and her face changed. No emotion, just steel. A folder had been attached, labeled Archfiles, Lyra 01. Inside, a spreadsheet listing irregular payments from Archewell to consulting agencies that didn't seem to exist. Screenshots of Slack messages between staff members flagging a missing $750,000 from a budget report. A redacted image of what appeared to be Meghan Markle's digital signature on an approval form that contradicted her public statements about not being involved in finances. And finally, a personal message. I was part of it. I stayed silent. I can't anymore. You must act before it goes public. Signed, Lyra. No last name. No metadata. Just the raw data and one disturbing closing sentence. This will hurt Harry more than anyone. But he already knows. Who is Lyra? To this day, no one knows for sure. But insiders have theories. Some say Lyra was a mid-level Archewell employee, someone who managed donor records and saw too much. Others believe Lyra is a code name for someone in Meghan's inner circle, possibly even someone who once lived in the Montecito guest house. There's even speculation that Lyra is a pseudonym created by multiple whistleblowers working together, employees who feared retaliation, lawsuits, or worse. But whoever Lyra is, they had access. Real access. Princess and knew it immediately. She didn't forward the email. She didn't call King Charles. She didn't tell her own daughter, Zara. She picked up her landline, the one with no digital trace, and made one call. To her legal advisor. And 3 words passed through the static. We begin tonight. Inside the palace legal strategy room. The palace doesn't move fast. But when it moves, it strikes with precision. By 6:00 a.m., 3 key royal legal advisors were rerouted to Sandringham under the cover of a planning session for the 2026 Commonwealth Tour. That was a lie. What actually happened behind those doors was the first unofficial meeting of what aides now call the Grey Inquiry, an off-the-books legal team with one goal: uncover the truth behind Archewell. Princess and laid out the documents on a long mahogany table. No one spoke for 5 minutes. One of the lawyers, a veteran of the Prince Andrew debacle, said quietly, "If this leaks, we won't survive another one of these." And response, "Then don't leak it." But she knew it was already too late. The Lyra effect. The media didn't have the documents yet, but things were already shifting. Archewell's PR director announced an indefinite sabbatical, just days after Lyra's email hit Anne's desk. A junior accountant at Archewell scrubbed their LinkedIn profile. And Meghan? She canceled 2 appearances. No statement. No comment. Just silence. The kind that comes before thunder. But perhaps the biggest indicator that Lyra had struck a nerve? Harry began calling royal staff again. According to one high-level aide, Harry placed a private call to Sir Clive Alderton, King Charles's chief advisor, requesting a confidential legal conversation. The request was denied, because by then, Princess Anne had already made her next move. The legal threshold. Why this matters. Some of you might wonder, what's the big deal? So someone leaked financial info. That happens in every nonprofit, right? Wrong. Because Archewell isn't just any nonprofit. It was built on the promise of ethics, transparency, and integrity. A legacy tied to Princess Diana's image. And when you're a duke and duchess receiving royal titles, operating an international foundation, and leveraging your status to raise money, you are accountable. And if Lyra's files are proven true, that money meant for mental health programs was rerouted into personal media ventures. That contracts were signed under shell names to avoid legal review. That key team members raised internal red flags and were allegedly silenced. Then this isn't just a scandal. It's potential fraud. And it knows that if this explodes publicly without a palace response, the monarchy becomes complicit by silence. The emotional weight, he already knows. The most chilling line in Lyra's email was this: "This will hurt Harry more than anyone." But he already knows. Why that line? Because it hints at something far darker than mismanagement. It suggests that Harry, at some point, became aware of questionable practices inside Archewell, that he may have raised objections, that he may have even tried to stop it, and failed. Some sources suggest Harry had pushed for an internal review months ago, but Meghan's media team advised against it, citing optics. Others believe Harry recorded voice memos out of guilt or fear, documenting what he couldn't say publicly. If true, that would explain why the palace is treating this like a live grenade. Because if the monarchy knew and did nothing, the entire institution burns. Why Anne, and not Charles or William? It's a fair question. Why didn't King Charles initiate this? Why not William, who stands to inherit everything? Because both men are compromised in different ways. Charles is Harry's father. His heart, however bruised, What happens when the person you're trying to protect becomes the one you have to investigate? That's the question that froze Princess and in place as she scanned the next file in the Lyra drop. She'd expected to find damning evidence on Archewell, Meghan's team, the finances, the lawsuits. But what she didn't expect was that Harry's name would be written not just once, but over a dozen times. This wasn't just a case of looking the other way. It looked like he'd known. Worse, he might have approved some of it. Now, the palace was in dangerous territory. Because how do you investigate a prince? Not just any prince, but Diana's son, the spare who broke away from the firm, who said goodbye to the institution and all its ghosts, only to now, perhaps, be haunting it himself. And at the center of it all, Archewell, the nonprofit that was supposed to be their redemption story, their safe haven, their global platform for change. Instead, it was falling apart. Quietly, painfully, and now, publicly. Inside Archewell, a castle built on fog. Let's look closer at Archewell. From the outside, it looked polished. Glossy press releases, ambitious mission statements, documentaries, podcast deals, award ceremonies. But once you strip back the curtain, the cracks begin to show. Problem number 1, high turnover. In less than 3 years, over 17 staff members left. Some quit. Some were quietly let go. A few signed NDAs so tight, even their friends didn't know what they were working on in the first place. One former marketing strategist described it like this: "We thought we were building something impactful, but it felt like we were building a brand around 2 people who couldn't even agree on the same goal." That's not a statement from a tabloid. That's someone who was inside. And it gets worse. Problem number 2, the disappearing projects. Remember the big splash announcements? The animated series, Pearl, created by Meghan herself? Gone. The Spotify podcast deal that ended with only 12 episodes and a few scattered headlines? Terminated. The school-building partnership in Rwanda? Never materialized. Sources close to Archewell claim that many of these projects were announced before funding was secured or partnerships finalized. Some believe it was strategy, build hype, then build support. Others say it was desperation. They wanted to prove they could build a royal-free empire, said one insider. But they forgot that empires need structure. They need accountability. They need discipline. And none of that, it seems, was happening at Archewell. Problem number 3, money that doesn't add up. The most serious issue Lyra flagged? The finances. Now, keep in mind, Archewell is a nonprofit. That means it must file public tax returns. Those filings have raised eyebrows before. But they were always brushed off as errors or minor discrepancies. But Lyra's files told a different story. They revealed a $1.2 million discrepancy between donor reports and disbursement records. Wire transfers from Archewell to private consulting firms that did not appear on public documentation. A $375,000 invoice labeled Strategic Development Retreat, but no photos, no records, no official event ever confirmed. Even more shocking? Some of the companies receiving money were linked to Meghan's former Soho House contacts. That wasn't just suspicious. That was dangerous, especially with Princess and now breathing down their necks. The moment that shattered the team. One staffer broke first. We'll call her Emma, not her real name. Emma had been working in project development. She joined Archewell because she believed in the cause. She had worked at UN Women. She had experience in grassroots campaigns. And she thought, genuinely, that Meghan and Harry could use their fame for good. Then came the moment she couldn't forget. "We were supposed to fund a girl's scholarship in Nairobi," she said. Everything was in place. Local partners were ready. But then, one day, it was just removed from the slate. No reason. No replacement. Just cut. The money? No one knew where it went. Emma asked questions. Within 2 weeks, she was put on leave. 3 weeks later, she signed an NDA and vanished. Until Lyra. Until now. Harry's role, a devastating discovery. And this brings us back to the red file. The one labeled Prince Harry, internal. Inside that file was something that changed everything. A timeline, emails, meeting summaries, and, most damning, a series of internal messages between Harry and Meghan's chief financial officer, dated 6 months after Archewell's launch. In them, Harry allegedly pushed to fast-track discretionary approvals for 2 major vendor contracts. both of which were later linked to the missing funds Lyra referenced. Now, does this mean Harry was stealing? No. But does it suggest he knew that protocols were being bent, if not broken? Yes. And when that information reached Princess, the stakes skyrocketed. Because if Harry was complicit, then this wasn't just a Meghan scandal. It was a Sussex scandal, and the palace would have to respond. The emotional fallout, the staff WhatsApp group. Every office has one, even Archewell. The WhatsApp group chat used by junior staffers to vent, joke, share memes, and, occasionally, whistleblow. Lyra had screenshots. In them were heartbreaking messages. We're just here to make them look good, not actually change anything. Don't bother asking. They'll say yes then ghost you. Harry looked so lost today. I think he knows. Meghan just said we don't need the Africa project anymore. She wants to do another Netflix doc instead. These weren't trolls. These were employees. Some of them only a few months into their roles. Some of them still using Meghan's quotes as their email signatures. And now, disillusioned, angry, afraid. Meghan's management style, the divide. Meghan had once been praised for her work ethic. But Archewell revealed another side. She was controlling, say insiders. Detail-obsessed, demanding, but also distant. One former staffer said, she wanted to control every image, every quote, every post. But when things went wrong, she vanished. There was no accountability. When Meghan showed up to team Zoom calls, it was often with cameras off. She'd join late, leave early, or sometimes never speak at all. Harry, on the other hand, was friendlier. Clueless, even. He'd ask if we were okay, another insider said. But he didn't really know what we were working on. He wanted to help, but it felt like he wasn't being told everything. That contradiction is at the heart of the Archewell collapse. One trying to manage too much. The other barely managing to understand what was happening. And in between them, a collapsing organization. Princess Anne's internal report. 2 weeks after receiving the Lyra email, Princess Anne had a preliminary report compiled. Its conclusion? Archewell is structurally unsound, potentially non-compliant with charitable regulations, and at risk of reputational contamination to the monarchy. Reputational contamination. The words sent a chill through the corridors of Buckingham Palace. Charles read the report. So did William. But it was and who decided what to do next. She sent a sealed letter to the Royal Auditor General. She called for a royal-sanctioned audit of all known Archewell financial activity involving UK-based donors or events linked to the Crown. And just like that, it was official. The grey walls were crumbling. The facade was breaking. And there was no going back. But just as the palace prepared to go public, something unexpected happened. Meghan Markle filed a countersuit. And it wasn't against the palace. It was against someone far closer and far more dangerous. What happens when the person you trusted most suddenly becomes your biggest threat? You sue them. That's exactly what Meghan Markle did, quietly, but deliberately. And not in the UK, not in Montecito, but in a private court in Los Angeles County, shielded by California's unique celebrity privacy laws. And the defendant? Someone no one expected. Her own former chief of staff. A woman who had been at her side from the earliest days of Archewell. A woman who had walked Meghan through her transition out of royal life, coordinated her first American media campaign, helped her write emails to Netflix, and once referred to Meghan as her sister-in-arms. Her name? Genevieve Prescott. But why would Meghan turn on her? Why now? And what, exactly, did Genevieve do that made Meghan this terrified? Let's pull back the curtain. Because this lawsuit, this explosive, carefully concealed lawsuit, reveals something much darker. Not just a legal battle, but a war over secrets. Secrets someone was threatening to sell. And Meghan? She was willing to burn every bridge to stop it. Genevieve Prescott, the woman behind the Duchess. To understand this legal shockwave, you first have to know who Genevieve is. Born in Austin, Texas. Ivy League educated. Former political campaign strategist. Smart, stylish, quiet. She met Meghan through a mutual contact at a women's leadership summit years before the royal wedding. At the time, Genevieve was working in crisis communications, cleaning up messes for senators, celebrities, and CEOs. She was known for one thing: loyalty. The kind of loyalty that didn't flinch, didn't gossip, didn't flounder under pressure. So when Meghan stepped away from royal duties and needed someone who could navigate both palace politics and Hollywood chaos, Genevieve was the obvious choice. She was hired in secret, and for nearly 2 years, she was everywhere Meghan was, on private jets, behind backstage doors, in Zoom meetings with Netflix execs, even on speakerphone during Meghan's first interview back on American soil. She didn't just run Meghan's calendar. She ran her war room, and she kept notes, hundreds of them. The fallout, why it all went bad. According to court documents leaked to a media outlet in France, the relationship between Meghan and Genevieve began to sour in mid-2023. It started with disagreements over public image. Meghan allegedly wanted to shift Archewell's brand focus to more glamorous, high-profile partnerships. Think fashion campaigns, red carpet causes. Genevieve, however, warned that doing so would alienate the core philanthropic base. They argued, then stopped speaking altogether. And then, Genevieve resigned. No press release, no social media post, just gone. But she didn't go empty-handed. She left with over 3,000 emails, dozens of signed contracts, an internal audit request she had personally drafted and never submitted. Most chilling of all, a USB drive, encrypted, labeled simply, Sandringham Files. The lawsuit hits. Meghan fights back. 1 week after Princess and launched her internal investigation into Archewell, Meghan's legal team struck first, suing Genevieve Prescott for breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of intellectual property, and violation of confidentiality agreements. The suit was filed in Los Angeles Superior Court under the alias MR-VGP, but the initials couldn't hide the truth for long. The documents referenced a nonprofit based in Santa Barbara, confidential material related to high-profile donors, and personal recordings made within a private estate in Montecito. Genevieve's legal team responded immediately, claiming the case was an attempt to silence a whistleblower. They alleged that Genevieve had been forced to sign documents under duress, that she had been made aware of potential illegal activity inside Archewell, and that Meghan had personally intervened to stop a financial report from being filed with U.S. regulators. The court sealed most of the documents, but enough leaked to paint a clear picture. This wasn't just a disgruntled employee. This was a controlled detonation. Meghan knew what was coming, and she tried to preempt the explosion with legal fire. But the problem? The fire was already spreading. Whispers of the Prescott tapes. It started as a rumor on private message boards, then exploded across WhatsApp groups, influencer circles, and eventually into the inboxes of royal reporters. Genevieve, it seemed, had recorded meetings. Not just one or two, but dozens. Not sneakily, openly. Team meetings, budget reviews, and, according to one insider, a 38-minute recording of Meghan describing a strategy to shift Archewell optics by separating finances from family. That phrase, separating finances from family, raised red flags, because it implied something deeper. That Meghan might have been planning to detach Archewell from any royal-related oversight or legal exposure, while continuing to profit off royal connections. One palace insider called it the most dangerous line we've seen since the Oprah sit-down. Harry's involvement, heartbroken or helpless? Where was Harry in all of this? Here's where the emotional beat hits hardest. Sources close to the palace, and leaked excerpts from legal filings, suggest that Harry tried to stop the lawsuit. Yes, you heard that right. He allegedly begged Meghan not to sue Genevieve. Why? Because he knew Genevieve, trusted her. She had helped him draft his first post-royal speech. She had arranged the private Zoom call with military veterans that meant so much to him. And, perhaps most importantly, she had warned him. 2 weeks before she quit, Genevieve allegedly pulled Harry aside and said, "There are things happening here you don't see. You're being protected from them. But they'll come for you too, eventually. What would you do if the people you trusted most suddenly wanted your voice to betray you?" That's the nightmare Prince Harry woke up to. He was being dragged into a legal war, one that he never thought he'd be part of. Not like this. Not against Meghan. Not against the palace. But most terrifying of all, he was being subpoenaed for something he didn't even remember doing. Secret recordings. His own. Buried on encrypted hard drives. Logged under anonymous backups. Never meant to surface. And yet, they did. How? Let's rewind. Because this chapter isn't just about tapes. It's about memory, trauma, and the terrifying realization that the truth doesn't need permission to leak. The hard drive hidden in Montecito. After Genevieve Prescott's subpoena landed on the desk of N's lead investigator, everything changed. Genevieve, as expected, complied, but with a twist. She turned over one file, labeled simply, HR_audio zip. Inside it, 32 audio recordings. Most were staff meetings, internal policy calls, project briefings. But 5 of them, they were different. They were private. And the voice in them, Prince Harry, talking, venting, recording voice notes for future reference. A practice he'd picked up in therapy as a way to externalize emotion, as his counselor once told him. But these weren't harmless journal entries. They were raw, unfiltered, and damning. The emotional weight of recording yourself. Let's pause for a second. Because this part, it's deeply personal. Harry has often said he doesn't trust the press. He's accused tabloids of ruining his childhood, of killing his mother, of twisting every word he's ever said. So why would someone like Harry record anything at all? The answer lies in his trauma. After Diana's death, Harry developed a coping mechanism, journaling. But not with a pen, with his voice. He would talk into a recorder, sometimes for hours. At first, it was therapy, but later, it became strategy. So when Archewell was launched, and the chaos of their post-royal life spiraled into a media frenzy, Harry started recording again. Privately, secretly, not to expose anyone, but to remember, to protect his own version of the truth. Ironically, those very recordings would soon do the opposite. Recording number 1. They don't tell me anything. The first tape was dated May 14, 2023. Harry is heard speaking softly, sounding exhausted. I walked into that Zoom meeting, and they were already on slide 8. Meghan nodded at me like I'd been there the whole time. I have no idea what Archewell is even doing this quarter. He sighs. I thought we were building something real. A legacy. But it feels like a marketing agency now. There's a long pause. I don't think I'm supposed to ask questions anymore. He ends the note with a quiet, resigned line. Maybe it's just easier if I smile and wave. Imagine being the palace. And hearing that, suddenly, the Sussex power couple didn't look so united. Suddenly, Harry didn't sound complicit. He sounded trapped. Recording number 2. And would never approve. The second tape was what cracked everything open. Dated June 7, 2023, Harry recorded a voice note after a heated internal debate about financial partnerships with a controversial media conglomerate. I told Meghan we couldn't take the money. Not if they're connected to that oil fund. She said it's standard. That everyone does it. He continues. I said, and would never approve. And Meghan rolled her eyes and said, well, and doesn't run Archewell, does she? Another long pause. Maybe she should. Boom. That tape was enough for N's legal team to request full audit rights over any Archewell dealings that intersected with UK charities or Commonwealth campaigns. Because Harry had just implicated knowledge, resistance, and ultimately, failure to act. Recording number 3, The Confession. Dated August 3, 2023. Harry sounds like he's just finished a long argument. There's tension in his voice. We lost another donor. She says we're not transparent enough. I told Meghan we needed to show the numbers. She said it's handled. His voice cracks a little. I don't know what's real anymore. I see headlines about us doing all this great stuff, but I don't know what we've actually done. Where's the money going? Then comes the bombshell. Part of me wants to walk away from it all. But I can't. Because if I do, what happens to the kids? What happens to Diana's name? In that single recording, Harry revealed 3 devastating truths. Donors were leaving. Meghan was controlling financial transparency. Harry was losing faith in his own organization, and perhaps himself. The palace's dilemma, protect or expose. Now Anne had a problem. She had evidence, but it was emotionally nuclear. To use it publicly would destroy Harry. To suppress, it would betray the integrity of the crown. So what did she do? She took the recordings directly to King Charles. According to leaked accounts from a palace aide, and sat across from her brother, pressed play on the second tape, and watched his face crumble. Charles reportedly whispered only 3 words when it ended. My poor boy. That same evening, a handwritten note was delivered from the king's desk to Harry's legal team. Its contents remained private. But Harry's legal team reportedly withdrew 2 scheduled filings that same night. Meghan's fury. You let them listen? The recordings rocked Meghan's legal team. According to insiders, she had no idea Harry had made them, or that Genevieve had access to the backups. When she confronted Harry, things turned explosive. She allegedly asked him, "How could you let them hear this? Do you know what they'll do with it?" Harry replied, "I didn't let them. You sued the one person who had it." The fracture widened. One aide described their dynamic in the weeks that followed as cold, tactical, and businesslike. Not a marriage, not even a partnership, just silence and strategy. The public fallout begins. While the tapes were never released publicly, word of them began to leak. First as rumors, then as thinly veiled references in tabloid columns. Then finally, one major royal biographer confirmed their existence on live television. The public reaction was mixed. Some sympathized with Harry, portraying him as a wounded soul trapped between duty and love. Others viewed the recordings as proof he had lost control of his own narrative. But everyone agreed on one thing. Archewell was no longer sustainable. Donors began pulling out. Public relations firms cut ties. A planned fundraiser in San Francisco was canceled with 24 hours' notice. And all the while, the palace waited and said nothing. Charles remained silent. But behind the scenes, they were preparing something bigger, something official, and something devastating. Because buried in one last recording was a name no one expected. A name whispered only once, but loud enough to shake the royal walls. And that name was Camilla. What if the most dangerous weapon in a royal war wasn't a lawsuit, a leaked file, or a hidden bank account, but a diary? Not just any diary. Not Harry's. Not Anne's. Meghan's. Yes, there was a diary. Kept in the early days of her royal life. Handwritten. Bound in leather. Monogrammed. And until now, no one outside of Clarence House even knew it existed. But one person did. And that person didn't just keep it safe. She read it. Page by page. Entry by entry. Princess Anne. Because when Meghan Markle left the UK, she took many things with her. But the diary? She left that behind. And when it was found, stored in a forgotten chest, deep in a wardrobe beneath a collection of old speeches and state dinner menus, it wasn't discarded. It was archived, catalogued, locked away. Until now. How did the diary end up at Clarence House? This is the first mystery. Meghan kept journals. Everyone knew that. She was a writer at heart. Before she was a duchess, she ran the TIG, a lifestyle blog full of affirmations, self-reflection, and curated quotes. But this diary? It wasn't meant for the public. It began sometime in 2017, just after her engagement. And it stopped, abruptly, in early 2020. The final page was dated January 7th, 2020, the day before Harry and Meghan dropped the Megxit bombshell on the world. But here's the strange part. It was left behind in one of their private quarters during their brief stay at Clarence House after returning from Canada for talks. It wasn't left out. It was tucked deep behind a drawer. No one found it for months. Until a staffer, cleaning out the suite for a visiting diplomat, opened the old chest and spotted it wedged behind silk scarves. They handed it in. The palace archivist logged it. And, according to multiple sources, it was quietly transferred to a secure vault at Clarence House. Not destroyed. Not returned. Preserved. Because something about it made Princess Anne say, "Keep it. We may need it someday." And now, that day had come. What did the diary contain? This is where it gets surreal. The entries were honest. Too honest. They revealed a Meghan far more complex than her public image suggested. Witty, insecure, ambitious, lonely, calculating, and at times, furious. She wrote about fashion fittings. About how cold the palace corridors were, physically and emotionally. She vented about staff, mocked certain traditions. And then, she began to name names. The Camilla entry, "She looks through me." The most explosive passage? Dated March 5th, 2019. Camilla was at lunch. She smiled politely, but I swear she looked right through me. Like I wasn't real. Like I was some side character in her family drama. It made my skin crawl. Then, a few lines later, I asked Harry if she liked me. He said, "She tolerates you." I laughed, but inside, I wanted to scream. If I ever become queen, I'm burning that throne room. Figuratively, of course. Mostly, that one passage set off alarm bells at every level. Because suddenly, this wasn't about financial fraud. It wasn't about branding. This was psychological warfare on the monarchy itself. A duchess fantasizing about figuratively burning the throne room? That's not journal therapy. That's a threat, even if veiled in sarcasm. Meghan versus the institution, page by page. Other diary entries included a night before the Oprah interview reflection. This is the last time I'll let them script me. Tomorrow, the world hears my side. And maybe, finally, they'll believe me. A note about Catherine, Princess of Wales. She's perfectly nice, but so controlled it's suffocating. Like having tea with an android. A shocking aside about the Queen's corgis. Even the dogs act like they outrank me. And finally, a chilling line in red ink on a torn page. Soon, they'll all regret letting me in. That page was torn, but the words remained. And they hit like a slap. And read them. So did Charles. And later, so did William. Each had a different reaction. And went still. Charles wept. William? He allegedly said. And we gave her everything. Why was the diary never returned? That's the part that's ethically messy. Normally, personal belongings would be returned to the former royals after their exit. But this diary wasn't left out in the open. It was buried, hidden, and once it was found, it became evidence. Of what? Not a crime, but intent, emotional motive. Proof that Meghan's relationship with the royal family was far more adversarial than anyone had realized, long before Megxit. Princess Anne's reasoning, according to close sources, she put it in writing. If it's in writing, it's not gossip. It's testimony. Brutal logic, but effective. And now, it was being considered as supporting material in the Archewell investigation. Can a diary be used as evidence? Technically, no, not in a legal sense, unless the writer approves. But in royal circles? It's political TNT. Because the monarchy doesn't rely on courts to maintain power, it relies on public perception. And this diary, if it ever leaked, would destroy any shred of Meghan's image as a misunderstood outsider. It showed a woman who played the long game, felt superior to the very traditions she smiled through, fantasized about dismantling the system that made her famous. That's not empathy. That's strategy. And in Anne's mind, it was all the justification she needed to move forward with full force. The final entry, the end of the fairy tale, dated January 7th, 2020. The tone is different, quieter, almost sad. Harry says we should just announce it. I said yes, but part of me is terrified, not of the press or the Queen, but of failing. What if we leave and we're just ordinary? What if no one cares after all this? Then, the last line, written in trembling ink. I wanted the crown, but not like this. It's the only time Meghan ever directly references wanting to be queen, and the most damning line of all. Because it confirms the palace's worst suspicions, that this wasn't just a departure. It was a failed coronation. And when that dream died, Meghan didn't walk away. She fought. With cameras. With lawyers. With content deals. And now, with silence. Anne's decision, release or restrain. Princess Anne held the diary for 2 hours after reading it. No aides. No lawyers. Just her. She took it to her private suite. Made a cup of tea. How do you prepare for war when the ghost of your worst fear is suddenly speaking again? That's the question Princess Anne now faced. Not just as a sister, not just as a daughter of the late Queen, but as the strategist now leading the royal family's silent counterattack against Meghan Markle, Archewell, and the collapse of royal public trust. The leaked recordings, the diary, the lawsuits, the mounting headlines, and now, an alleged recording of Princess Diana, surfacing from Meghan's own digital archive. To most, it seemed unthinkable, unethical, even cruel. But to Anne, it was strategy, and her version of strategy wasn't theatrical. It was surgical, cold, effective, quiet, and didn't scream. She didn't campaign. She didn't leak to the press. She observed. She analyzed. And when the time came, she struck. And this strike would start with a weapon no royal had ever used before. Not a scandal. Not a scandal response. An independent royal-led legal inquiry. Inside Anne's war room. Don't picture mahogany and crystal chandeliers. This was no official palace chamber. Anne's war room was her private library in Gloucestershire, converted overnight into a fully functioning intelligence command center. On the books, it was part of her planning for a series of upcoming Commonwealth engagements. In reality, it was the epicenter of Operation Crown Integrity. Anne's personal name for the rapidly developing legal mission to dismantle Archewell's influence and expose what she feared was systematic deception disguised as philanthropy. Her team? 2 MI6 analysts working royal investigations in retirement. A forensic accountant on loan from a global anti-fraud NGO. A legal advisor who once helped untangle the fallout from Prince Andrew's Epstein disaster. Their task? Map every thread of Archewell's influence across charity, media, and political lines. And if necessary, choke it off. Why Anne? Why not Charles or William? The answer is delicate, but brutally honest. Charles is compromised by emotion. William is compromised by proximity. And she's compromised by nothing. No lingering father-son guilt. No media comparisons. No emotional breakdowns on Oprah. She is the most invisible of the senior royals, and the most lethal. Where others have courtiers and crisis PR teams, and has discipline. Where others waver, she decides. And her decision was simple. If this continues, there will be no monarchy left to protect. So she initiated a strategy that no one, not even Queen Elizabeth during Diana's fallout, had dared to authorize. A legal one. Because Anne knew something Meghan didn't. The British Crown does not forget. And it never fights loud. It fights long. The Diana recording, fact or fiction? The most disturbing intelligence surfaced during a forensic sweep of digital archives turned over by Genevieve Prescott. A video file. Grainy. Unmarked. Encrypted. But when decrypted by Anne's MI6 contact, the title appeared. Diana_unedited_1996.wave. The file was only 9 minutes long, but it was enough. In it, Diana's voice can be heard discussing the future of the monarchy. Not formally. Casually. She's sitting in what sounds like a hotel room. A television hums in the background. She sips tea, laughs once, then says, if they don't evolve, they'll become irrelevant. And someone will come along who pretends to love them, but only wants the crown's attention, not its burden. No names. No direct accusations. But Anne recognized the implication immediately. The tape had been edited before. It had appeared in brief snippets during old documentaries. But this version was raw. And the palace had never seen it in full. How did Meghan get it? Why was it on her digital archive? No one knows. But one theory suggests Meghan had gained access to Diana's unedited tapes through Harry's own private collection, handed to him by Paul Burrell, Diana's former butler. If true, then Meghan may have intended to release it, edited, to reinforce the outsider victim narrative that had fueled her public image, and wasn't about to let that happen. Not without context. Not without control. Anne's cold logic, the strategy of quiet retaliation. And didn't rant. She didn't leak. She simply made a decision that would terrify any modern PR-savvy royal. She opened communications with Revenue and Customs and Charity Commission of England and Wales. Not to discuss the monarchy, but to raise concerns, as a British citizen, about Archewell's fundraising linked to UK donors and campaigns. That was the first strike. Legal. Discreet. Deadly. She followed it by assigning her team to build a legal timeline. And here's what they found. Meghan had signed contracts that linked Archewell to UK-based charities. Some of these charities received only a fraction of pledged funds. One fundraising event used Diana's image, without legal clearance, and flagged it all. She then met privately with 3 Commonwealth High Commissioners in London to discuss cultural exploitation under the guise of advocacy. Every move she made, carefully calculated to make Meghan's reputation radioactive in diplomatic and philanthropic circles. This wasn't about revenge. It was about containment. William's resistance. The sibling fracture deepens. But not everyone approved. William was livid. According to palace insiders, he confronted Anne in a private meeting. He's my brother. We don't destroy our own. Anne's reply? He's already destroyed himself. It was the most direct, ruthless line uttered behind royal walls in years. But it didn't come from hatred. It came from duty. Because Anne wasn't acting like a sister. She was acting like a soldier. And the monarchy was her command. The ethics of a royal inquiry. And knew the media would come for her. That questions would swirl about ethics, legality, fairness. That critics would call it a witch hunt. But Anne had one thing on her side that Meghan never did. Silence. She never once gave a public comment. Never once mentioned Meghan by name. Never appeared to gloat. Because her goal wasn't to win headlines. It was to protect something older than Meghan, older than Archewell, older even than Diana. The crown. And protection, in Anne's world, doesn't come through sentiment. It comes through action. The final memo, 5 words that changed everything. After reading the latest report from her investigative team, Anne wrote one short memo to the Palace Crisis Council. It wasn't long. It wasn't emotional. Just 5 words. She won't ruin this again. And that line, leaked. Quietly. Deliberately. Published in a minor London paper known for its monarchy ties. Meghan's legal team saw it. Her PR advisors called an emergency meeting. Because in those 5 words was a message. You got past us once. You won't again. But what Anne didn't expect was who would try to stop her next. Not Meghan. Not Harry. King Charles. And what he did behind her back would send shockwaves through the entire institution. What if the person meant to lead the charge for justice decided to shield the very ones under fire? Princess Anne had acted decisively, quietly, surgically, and without personal vendetta. Her plan wasn't about revenge. It was about defending the crown from reputational collapse. But in every war, there's always someone behind the scenes pulling levers of power with a trembling hand. And in this case, that hand belonged to King Charles, the monarch, the father. The man still haunted by a broken family, a fractured childhood, and the last image of his youngest son walking away from Buckingham Palace with Meghan by his side, smiling, waving, free. And perhaps worst of all, he was also the man still desperate for reconciliation. Even now, even as subpoenas mounted, donor scandals unraveled, and internal recordings surfaced, one featuring Diana herself. Charles didn't want war. He wanted peace. But at what cost? That's the question Anne would soon ask. And the answer would reveal just how far Charles was willing to go to protect a son who no longer wanted to be protected. The call that changed the game. It happened quietly. Late at night. A phone call from Buckingham Palace to a high-level legal consultant previously working with Archewell. Officially, it was about royal protocol clarification. Unofficially, it was a veiled request. King Charles had asked the lawyer whether certain aspects of the investigation, specifically those involving Harry, could be de-escalated. The lawyer, confused, asked for clarification. And Charles reportedly replied, "This cannot become a spectacle. Not like before. Not like Diana." Those words were later relayed to and via an internal palace security brief. And when Anne read them, she went still. Not because she was shocked, but because she knew what this really meant. Charles wasn't protecting Archewell. He wasn't even protecting the monarchy. He was protecting himself. From guilt. From grief. From the unbearable truth that his youngest son may have become the institution's greatest threat, without even realizing it. Charles's hidden meeting in Highgrove. A week after Anne's memo, "She won't ruin this again," was leaked to the press. King Charles quietly summoned 2 senior aides to Highgrove. The purpose? To explore containment strategies. What does that mean? In plain terms, it means Charles wanted to halt Anne's inquiry without officially stopping it. He didn't want public backlash for siding with Meghan, but he also didn't want this to escalate into a full-blown scandal involving Harry. So he asked a shocking question. Can we isolate Meghan legally without touching Harry? The aides stared in silence. Because that's not how it works. They tried to explain. Harry signed off on financial decisions. His name appears in internal emails. His voice is on the recordings. He approved Archewell partnerships. He took the meetings, wrote the speeches, shook the hands. There was no way to surgically remove him from the narrative. And yet, Charles insisted. One aide later confided. He wasn't thinking like a king. He was thinking like a father. And in that moment, he became a liability. Princess Anne's fury. When Anne found out about Charles's private meeting, she didn't scream. She didn't storm into his office. She did something far more terrifying. She delivered a sealed envelope to his valet. Inside, 1 page. On it, she had written, "You silenced Diana. You will not silence this." Those words were later echoed in a conversation with William, who had been attempting to broker calm between his father and aunt, and told him, "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And you can't stop someone who believes silence is love." William didn't respond, because he knew and was right. The emotional collapse of a monarch. That night, Charles reportedly collapsed into tears in his study. He didn't weep for the monarchy. He wept for Diana, for Camilla, For the child he watched walk behind Diana's casket, only to now become a man who was voluntarily walking toward a media firestorm he couldn't contain. He wept for Harry's pain and Meghan's ambition, and for the grandchildren he barely knew. And then, in a rare moment of brutal honesty, he whispered to his senior aide, "I was never strong enough. Not for Diana. Not for them. And now we pay for that." The aide, moved, tried to comfort him, but Charles waved it away, because he knew what was coming next. The press begins to circle. The royal rota had gotten wind of something serious. Not the recordings. Not the diary. Not yet. But they'd sniffed out the scent of war behind palace gates. Phrases like internal review and charity concerns began appearing in headlines. Anonymous palace sources quoted unusual meetings between princess and compliance officers. Suddenly, the press was beginning to connect dots. And Charles couldn't stop it. Not with PR. Not with silence. Not anymore. Camilla's role, a silent force. Camilla, for all her controversies over the years, understood one thing Charles never did. Public perception is war, and you either win it or drown in it. She advised Charles to stay out of the Archewell investigation. Let and do her job. Let the crown look strong. Charles hesitated. Camilla reportedly told him, "This isn't about Harry anymore. It's about us. It's about what's left." But Charles was still wrestling with something deeper. A promise he once made to Diana, long before she died, that he would always protect their boys. Even now, decades later, that promise rang in his ears like a curse. The attempted intervention. Desperate, Charles did one more thing. He requested a private phone call with Harry. After weeks of silence, no intermediaries, just father to son, the call reportedly lasted 9 minutes. Charles began by expressing concern. Harry responded flatly. Then Charles made his plea. "Please, step away from this. Let it go. Come home. We can fix this before it's too late." Harry was quiet. Then he reportedly said, "It's already too late. You let it get here." Then he hung up. And with that, the last chance at a peaceful de-escalation vanished. Anne's next move. After learning of Charles's call and made her decision, she called in the Royal Auditor General. She authorized formal proceedings. No longer just internal probes or strategic monitoring. This was now a crown-level legal audit. Archewell, Meghan, Harry, every donor, every vendor, every media partner, every dollar. She signed the order in silence. And as she did, she turned to her private secretary and said, "We offered them a soft exit. They chose war. Now they'll understand the cost." But the next morning, before the ink had even dried, a document leaked to the press. A sealed court filing. From California. One line stood out. "This divorce is being filed under the request of both parties and shall proceed without dispute." The Sussex separation was no longer rumor. It was real. And what that filing revealed next would rock the entire royal institution. What happens when the person you're trying to protect becomes the one you have to investigate? That's the question that froze Princess Anne in place as she scanned the next file in the Lyra drop. She'd expected to find damning evidence on Archewell, Meghan's team, the finances, the lawsuits. But what she didn't expect was that Harry's name would be written not just once, but over a dozen times. This wasn't just a case of looking the other way. It looked like he'd known. Worse, he might have approved some of it. Now, the palace was in dangerous territory. Because how do you investigate a prince? Not just any prince, but Diana's son, the spare who broke away from the firm, who said goodbye to the institution and all its ghosts, only to now, perhaps, be haunting it himself. And at the center of it all, Archewell, the nonprofit that was supposed to be their redemption story, their safe haven, their global platform for change. Instead, it was falling apart. Quietly, painfully, and now, publicly. Inside Archewell, a castle built on fog. Let's look closer at Archewell. From the outside, it looked polished. Glossy press releases, ambitious mission statements, documentaries, podcast deals, award ceremonies. But once you strip back the curtain, the cracks begin to show. Problem number 1, high turnover. In less than 3 years, over 17 staff members left. Some quit. Some were quietly let go. A few signed NDAs so tight, even their friends didn't know what they were working on in the first place. One former marketing strategist described it like this: "We thought we were building something impactful. But it felt like we were building a brand around two people who couldn't even agree on the same goal. That's not a statement from a tabloid. That's someone who was inside. And it gets worse. Problem number 2, the disappearing projects. Remember the big splash announcements? The animated series, Pearl, created by Meghan herself? Gone. The Spotify podcast deal that ended with only 12 episodes and a few scattered headlines? Terminated. The school-building partnership in Rwanda? Never materialized. Sources close to Archewell claim that many of these projects were announced before funding was secured or partnerships finalized. Some believe it was strategy, build hype, then build support. Others say it was desperation. They wanted to prove they could build a royal-free empire, said one insider. But they forgot that empires need structure. They need accountability. They need discipline. And none of that, it seems, was happening at Archewell. Problem number 3, money that doesn't add up. The most serious issue Lyra flagged? The finances. Now, keep in mind, Archewell is a nonprofit. That means it must file public tax returns. Those filings have raised eyebrows before. But they were always brushed off as errors or minor discrepancies. But Lyra's files told a different story. They revealed a $1.2 million discrepancy between donor reports and disbursement records. Wire transfers from Archewell to private consulting firms that did not appear on public documentation. A $375,000 invoice labeled Strategic Development Retreat, but no photos, no records, no official event ever confirmed. Even more shocking? Some of the companies receiving money were linked to Meghan's former Soho House contacts. That wasn't just suspicious. That was dangerous, especially with Princess and now breathing down their necks. The moment that shattered the team. One staffer broke first. We'll call her Emma, not her.